Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. Back with me, as always, is Jamie Franks. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here. Good to be back.
Always good to be back. We are a little bit late today. Normally we have this show out for the morning drive-in, but this show you'll be catching this on your afternoon drive home. The hardest thing with getting this show and getting these episodes out is schedules, and I know that you have a tight schedule. I have a tight schedule. Somebody said it to me. These short weeks seem to go by the longest. And
not for me.
I don't know if not now. Well, I mean, for me, I looked at today and I was like, wow, it's only Thursday. So,
and I was going to say that probably most people have Monday off and probably think today's Wednesday anyway. So,
well, yeah, I mean, I took Monday off from the office, but I did not have Monday off. I actually did stuff. I did landscaping stuff. So between that, the long ride on Sunday, the old age, we're looking rough. Looks like I got punched in the face. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sorry. If you're hearing this on Spotify and Apple, then you're good to go.
I did landscaping when I was in high school, and which was basically a glorified way of saying I got paid to dig holes. But I got paid when I was 17 in 1996. I was making $17 an hour, and my boss just paid me with a personal check, so there was no taxes or anything taken out of it. For a 17-year-old in 1996, I was balling for
not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Landscaping, digging holes.
Yeah.
But put some muscles on me. And
yeah, no, I had to bust out the weed whacker, and the growth was obnoxious, and we're actually doing part 2 this coming weekend. And it's not even my house. I'm helping a friend out, and it's enjoyable for me. I live in a townhouse, so I don't really have to do any of that. So when I get the chance to go out there and use some of the tools that I have, it's a fun time. And so, that's getting schedules all lined up are kind of somewhat the challenge. And the other challenges, and I know we've talked about this, and I know that I need to put a post out there on the main page, is coming up with topics to talk about. Yeah. So our topic for the day is we'll talk about that in a second, but I don't know if you're tracking on what's happening. I literally just got a 5-minute download because I've seen nothing but Liberty Safes in the social media news. Obviously, I think they're on the chopping block of being canceled because they obviously provided somebody's safe combination. And so that may be something we revisit next week. I want to do a little bit of research and kind of look into that. But for today's topic, this kind of stemmed from something that I've always been kind of tracking, but over the summer I've been looking at campers, and when I was in Florida for that class, I told you that I saw this awesome Mercedes Sprinter, and it was just done up like total badass overlanding. So when I reached out to you, I said, you know what, today let's talk about overlanding and how that plays out into your bug out situation. And then, I know that you're pretty in tune with the overlanding space. So I thought it would be a good topic to talk about.
Yeah, I was I was a well-known figure in off-roading and overlanding long before I was known for anything shooting related.
Okay.
I used to be the vice president of a national four-wheel drive club, a national level four-wheel drive club that had
oh, nice.
Regional chapters and stuff. I was the vice president of that for several years. I've been all over this country off-roading, and then probably 2008, 2009 is really when the term overlanding really started to take off, and that little branch of the off-road tree really started to grow, and I even started to kind of getting into it because um, for a long time there was in the off-roading world, there was kind of you could build a truck for like mud bogging or mudding,
Right. Mud. Yep.
um, or like rock crawling, and then kind of like there was like a little bit of third category, which was kind of just for like light to moderately modified kind of just like stock vehicles. Like an example would be if you just bought a stock Jeep, you didn't want to go crazy and build a rock crawler with an exo cage and dual reduction transfer cases and all that stuff, but you just bought a Jeep. Excuse me. um Put a winch bumper on it, put a lift, put 35-inch tires on it, and maybe some lights or whatever, and that would
Right.
kind of be like a trail riding vehicle. And then in the late 2000s, like I said, like probably 08, 09, and that's when, and like it really caught my attention, and that's because my Tacoma was kind of on the higher end of that trail riding um, type vehicle, where mine was basically just a highly modified, highway vehicle, uh, kind of kind of on the border of becoming a rock crawler. And then when the overlanding piece started to take off, that really started catching more of my interest, and I felt like that was kind of more in my wheelhouse because of my interest in kind of prepping and survivalism, or
Right.
being a survivalist, whatever we want to call.
Sure.
And like I just liked the allure of people. Some people call it overlanding, some people call it vehicle dependent off-road expedition, meaning your vehicle is as the name implies, your vehicle dependent. So your vehicle is like your base of operations.
Operations. Right.
Your
Yeah.
your vehicle contains your water supply, your vehicle contains your food supply, and like nowadays that includes like a refrigerator, which I have, which is way better than a cooler. I don't know if we were going to get into all that much
Oh
detail, but
yeah. Well, yeah. Sure.
um but uh but yeah, so your vehicle is set up to sustain you for a long period of time, basically like off the grid, for lack of a better term. And like the longest trip I ever did, I did a 7-day trip down in Baja California, FAMA,
Okay.
Tijuana, Baja California, Mexico. But in Baja California, Mexico, me and a couple of friends, we did it. It was once we left pavement, we did not return to pavement for 7 days, and it was really cool. And it was really cool to be able to stretch our legs for that long. But all the considerations that go along with that, carrying 7 days worth of food, 7 days worth of water, 7 days worth of, well, not 7 days worth, but enough spare parts and tools, like spare axles, spare ball joints, the tools and the know-how to change them.
Right. That's a
Fuel
good point.
is a consideration.
Yep.
So that's the longest like solid overland trip I've done. I have done a trip that was longer than that, but we like resupplied along the way. And we'd be what we called off pavement. We'd be off pavement for 3 days, 3 to 4 days, and then we would then we would kind of loop around, and we would get back to an area where we would be back on pavement for a bit, and we would take that opportunity to resupply and all that stuff. But that was before I had my refrigerator, and a lot of people think having a refrigerator crosses into the glamping space, but I'm telling you, like, having a refrigerator is a freaking game changer in terms of being able to stay off the grid for longer.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, when you say refrigerator, obviously, we have different sizes, right? But so before we get to that, let's get to what is your overlanding setup?
So I have my truck is a 2000 Toyota Tacoma. I bought
Okay.
it. I bought it in 2001, but it was still a new vehicle when I bought it. It was like the dealer still had it on the lot from 2000.
Sure.
But
Now,
I bought it in '01.
did you buy that specifically for this reason?
No.
Okay.
I kind so it kind of happened by accident. Like, honestly, because Toyota has what's called a pre-runner. You see them all the time. And what it
Yes.
is, the Toyota Tacoma pre-runner is the 4-wheel drive chassis and suspension on a 2-wheel drive drivetrain. So also at that time, TRD had all they came out with all the superchargers and the fuel system modifications and all that stuff. So when I bought my Tacoma, I actually had the vision that I was going to turn it into like a street truck, like a street racing truck. And so I bought the pre-runner, and I put the supercharger on it and did all the fuel system modifications and all the performance modifications. And then yeah, we've talked before, like how I grew up kind of in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, and I grew up, hunting and camping and going back in the woods and all that stuff. And so through the course of doing research for modifying a couple of the performance modifications on my Tacoma, I came across these pictures of guys with trucks just like mine, like four-wheeling in places like, like Big Bear, California, and Paragon, Pennsylvania, which is closed now, and places up in Northern California and Arizona. And I was like, wait a second, I want to do that. So I took a sharp turn with my truck, which was a pre-runner. And then I actually went through, I was not the first, but I was one of the first that did the 4-wheel drive conversion on the pre-runner. So I took the pre-runner, which came from Toyota as, like I said, a 2-wheel drive truck, but with the 4-wheel drive chassis and suspension, and I converted it into 4-wheel drive. And then from there, it kind of grew, and I have like bumpers and rock sliders and skid plates all the way through that go all the way from the basically from the, because mine's an automatic transmission, so I have the radiator and the transmission cooler. So my skid plates go all the way from the radiator and transmission cooler all the way back to just forward of the rear axle. So I'm skid plated all the way back. Rock sliders, front and rear bumpers, locking differentials. I do have it's not a dual reduction transfer case, but if anybody's familiar, it's an inchworm. It's a super low range transfer case, but it's not dual reduction. Locking differentials, and then I do still have all the supercharger and performance mods and all that. And then when I got into the overlanding space, there were two ways to do it when kind of overlanding first started. And it was, if you had like a pickup truck, you could do like a camper module in the bed of the pickup truck. And there are several different makes and models of those now.
Right.
Back then there were only a couple to choose from. But or you could do a trailer, or you could do and like most people that had like Jeeps were doing the trailers. A few people that had like the mid-size trucks like mine, like Tacomas, were doing a trailer. But guys that had like the Land Rovers, like Land Rover Defenders and stuff like that, like they were just doing like it was like back in the 70s and 80s, and it was the Camel Trophy, the Camel cigarettes. Yep. And every year, like in some godforsaken place in the world, like sometimes it would be like in the Sahara Desert, or is that what like where like Tunisia and all that? It's the Sahara Desert, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So they would do like the Sahara Desert, or they would do like literally like in the middle of like the Amazon jungle. And they would put on this like off-road race in these like extreme off-road environments. And it was called the Camel Trophy. So if anybody's interested and doesn't know what I'm talking about, you can just probably Google search like Camel Trophy, and you'll come up with these like super modified out like overlanding, like Land Rover type vehicles. So when overlanding first started, you kind of either had to, like I said, a lot of pickup truck guys were doing like a module in the bed. They kind of became your camper and your storage and all that kind of all in one, and all on the on the mothership, so to speak, on the vehicle itself. And then, but I went the trailer route. I went with an expedition trailer. I built a trailer that because adventure trailers started around that same time. The company Adventure Trailers, AT, and they had a trailer called the Chaser, and that's what I really wanted. But those things like started at around 20 grand, and like at that time I think I was 24, 25. I couldn't afford to spend ultimately over 20 grand on this trailer. So fortunately, my dad builds trailers, so we basically home built a version of that Adventure Trailers Chaser. But since we built it ourselves, we did a couple of cool things. We made it so basically the tongue of the trailer goes all the way through the trailer. It's unbroken. It's one solid piece of half-inch wall square tubing that goes all the way through the trailer, like basically like the keel of a ship. And so that was, so if I had the trailer hooked up and I needed to be recovered from the rear, it's one solid connection. There's no break in the middle that would basically be a weak point or a weak link in the chain. So we did that. We made the distance from the front axle of my truck to the rear axle of my truck is exactly the same center to center distance as from the rear axle to the center of the trailer axle. So we made the track width match, the ground clearance match. We made the lug pattern on the axle match. So the spare tire for the trailer will fit the truck and vice versa. But since the track width, ground clearance, ride height, and axle to axle space is all the same, theoretically, the trailer should be able to go anywhere that my truck can go. The trailer should be able to clear any obstacle that my truck can clear. There has been one time, and I took my trailer like a lot of places and a lot of extreme, kind of basically like rock crawling and stuff here in Southern California. And there was one time when I took the trailer in such a narrow canyon. It's called it's out here in Anza-Borrego Desert. It's called the Slot. It's this little narrow slot canyon that you can go through, and I mean, it is just wide enough for my 2000 Toyota Tacoma. So I think the newer model Toyota Tacomas probably couldn't even make it. Because it was just wide enough with just a couple of inches clearance on each side for my truck to get through it. But there's a really sharp turn in there. And that is the only time where we had to stop, unhook the trailer, and like let me get my truck through it, and then back my truck up, and then reconnect the trailer and go on.
So then, but let me ask you. So you went with the Tacoma. Now, were guys going with the Tacoma over the Tundra because of size? Like, I mean, you know, everyone says, hey, size matters, but in this situation, you know, are you looking for a bigger truck with, you know, more storage, or do you look for the smaller one? And this is obviously for those people that are maybe just getting into it, maybe thinking about getting into it. What made you go with the smaller truck versus the larger one?
So it really, it's like anything else in the survival gear or prepping or you know, bug out bag, like any of those things, they have to be tailored to your specific situation, like whatever your specific situation is going to be. So it's, you know, I've talked about this many times before in many other avenues. Like, you have to be honest and realistic with yourself of what actually are you going to do with this vehicle. Like, not what are you doing with it in your wildest Facebook fantasies, but like, what actually are you going to be doing with this vehicle? So people very rarely choose a Tundra for off-roading because number one, it's heavier in a lot of off-roading situations, like when you're in rocks or in mud or in sand. Weight is not your friend. Weight is your enemy.
Right. Yeah.
And the Tundra has a longer wheelbase, which I was about to say it reduces your ground clearance, which isn't necessarily true. But when you're like going up over a rock or whatever, the further out your wheelbase is, that makes it more likely that you're going to hit something underneath or high center. So the longer wheelbase, the additional weight, you know, the Tundras that come with the V8, I mean, obviously it's going to drink more gas. So that's going to be a consideration off-road. And then, and also the width of the Tundra. Like when I went to Moab, there's a trail called Hell's Revenge. And again, there's a section of that trail where if you have a vehicle that's really any wider than my generation Tacoma, you're not going to get through there. So like, really, all things considered, the only thing that the Tundra really brings to the table is a greater towing capacity and a greater, you know, just more space to put stuff because it is a bigger truck. But it's heavier, it's longer, it's wider. It's, you know, there's one guy that I knew back in the day that he bought I want to say it was probably like a 2005 or 2006 Tundra, like that generation of Tundra, but he completely stripped it down. And I mean, I do believe when it was done, it was still street legal. But I mean, he took off all the body panels, like did kind of like a hybrid exoskeleton, and did a solid axle conversion in the front. And he made the only Tundra that if we're talking about in terms of off-roading, he had the only Tundra that I would have ever had. But other than
So,
that, I would have leaned away from it too.
got it. So I guess it, what it comes down to is when you're looking at this overlanding life or world or whatever, again, are you doing it as a hobby? Is it a weekend thing? I spent the summer looking at campers because I was going to tow that with my 21 Ram 1500.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to do with that was obviously, go camping, whether it was for a week, a weekend, or whatever that case may be. I would not go buy a 18 to 24-foot camper to go on these overland excursions, right? So
Yeah.
I think what needs to be defined is, overlanding in that situation, what you're doing to go and do these kind of excursions versus, it because overlanding is what you could do as a hobby. Having to bug out and use a vehicle in that situation, we're talking two different things, right? Like, I mean, now, is your setup to go do that? Yes, 100%. Would I, if I had a 24-foot camper that I was going to tow behind my truck, would I do that in that same situation? Well, I don't know. That to me, that would be a game time decision because, like you said, when you and I talked about doing this, in order to get out of the city, how are you doing that?
Yeah. So, it's, I always say, if you got 100 people in a room and you just ask the question, who here knows how to swim? 80 hands are going to go up out of 100 because 20 people know that they cannot swim at all. About 20% of those people are lying, and don't want to admit that they can't swim. But then
Right.
the other 60 or so, that literally is 60. You could go person to person, and that is 60 different definitions of what swimming is. Because some people
Sure.
think that if I go to Uncle Bob's house and do a cannonball into the 8-foot end of the pool, swim over to the ladder and get out, that's swimming. And
Right.
because I can do that over and over. I can do a cannonball in, doggy paddle over to the ladder, get out, do it all day. I used to do it when I was a kid. I did it every day in the summer. That's not swimming, but people think it is. And camping is like that too. Like I couldn't even venture to guess how many days of my life I've spent camping outside. And I can tell you probably less than 10% of it has been at a campground. But there are some people that that's all they know is at a campground.
Right.
And so so when you're talking about, you're exactly right. When you talk about using a vehicle as an emergency escape, like bug out platform, now we're talking a whole different thing. I mean,
Yep, 100%.
and like one of the things that I used to it was kind of like my little personal badge of honor thing that I tried to go for is like I have, and we've talked about this before too. Like I have all these, I have this whole big map case of all these topographical maps of all these areas that I've off-roaded in because I liked the challenge of being able to try to identify a location and a way to get to that location, and camp in a place where number one is not illegal and number two that where nobody else has ever been. And I have it's a picture on my Facebook, and it's me and my friend Matt, and he has a Tacoma. Mine is a 2000 extra cab is what they called it. I just have the extended cab portion. He had a 03 or 04 double cab. So he had it's two sets of doors. But he had a Tacoma that was modified almost equivalent to mine. And on this particular trip, I did not take the trailer. But I have a picture of us camped on the edge of this canyon in Utah. And I took this big I climbed up on this rock above our trucks and took this big panoramic picture. And there is no sign of another human as far as you can see from our vehicles out to the horizon. And so that's what I always like to do. I always like to try to camp in places where I was as far away as that the next nearest human was as far away as possible.
Right.
And I mean, that's probably one of the, I read an article a while back that said, in modern times, we should determine wilderness the term wilderness should be defined as how far away is the closest McDonald's, because there's so many McDonald's in this country.
Right.
And in the article, it was like a whole map of the United States, and there was like all these like dots of everywhere there was a McDonald's. And so they said like the places in the on this map, the places where you could go where you're the farthest away from one of those dots is what we should consider deep wilderness in these modern times. But
Right.
that's probably one of the most remote places I've ever been in my life, and you would have to have a vehicle like mine at a minimum to get there. And I like that.
There. Right. And so then we can define this as, obviously, there, there's a definite difference between overlanding, buying a camper, and having that as a, an FOB, if you will, or right. But and then the van life. So I think van life and overlanding are
very good. That's a very good distinction.
And if overlanding is here, then van life is definitely on the other side of the spectrum, because you can go get one of those panel vans, sprinter vans, whatever, and it literally be set up street legal wise. You throw a rack in there, you throw a little kitchenette in there, and there you go, van life, and you're good for streets. Overlanding takes you off of the streets. I'm going to see if I can put something up on the screen here. I don't know if this is going to work, so just bear with me, chat.
Chris, why are you taking your pants off? Stop it.
What? Oh my God. All right, let me, I don't know how to do this. Nope, I'm going to go back to this. We're going to see if I can, I don't know how to do any of this. So this may be horrible. Nope, that's not what I'm doing either. All right, well, anyway, what I wanted to show is a picture of this Mercedes Sprinter van, whether it's a Ram Sprinter van, whatever the case may be. But it's obviously it's on an all-wheel drive platform. So I think first step, if you're going to do overlanding, you're going to need something that can go off of the street, off pavement, as you put it. Now, so then there's one last kind of category I think that we need to break it down in. There's overlanding. There's buying a camper to go for weekend camps, Lake George, wherever you want to go. There's van life, and then there's shit hits the fan and you got to get out, right?
Yep.
Because I think at that point, I don't want your truck. I don't want my truck with a camper. I don't want a van life. Heck, if we're talking that, I want an 18-wheeler with a giant pointed plow on the front to move any vehicles that I need to out of my way, right? I mean, think about it, again, but also I also want on the back of that a badass, I'm not even gonna say dirt bike, but a badass adventure bike that I could then get skinnier, if you will, to go places that I couldn't go with that truck. So, when this can be a 3-hour episode if we get into every little piece of it, which, oh no, here we are again. But, so I think that there's different avenues of this, and obviously the most popular, I think right now, is the overlanding and then that van life experience. And we're going to let's table the overlanding for a second. And if you look at, because you did mention that you did not bring your trailer one time. So for me, when I was looking at campers, I was like, okay, cool. Because I'm thinking totally Lethal Weapon, Martin Riggs, parking my cool ass camper on the side of the road, overlooking the ocean, and it's all good until somebody comes and shoots it up with a helicopter. So, I looked at it as then, okay, I can bring my FOB and park it anywhere, and then I have a vehicle to go do things with. But somebody just kind of pointed out, and they said, yeah, but like you can't just if you're the passenger and someone else is driving your truck, you can't just go into the back to go make a sandwich or, use the bathroom. Like you have to stop, pull over, and then go into it. You can't have anybody in your trailer if it's hooked up to your truck. So then it was like, okay, well, do you get one of those campers that you are driving, and passenger can just go kind of crawl in the back, get some rest, whatever, make the sandwiches, bring you back a little, ham and egger, and you continue on with your trek. I think it all depends on what you're doing and what you want to get out of this.
So like the way I did my setup, one of the things I was very I don't know, meticulous about. I wanted my setup to be modular, so that I could build it up or shave it down depending on what I was doing. And you're exactly right. So the one trip that we went out way out into the backcountry of Utah, like way away from roads and civilizations, like on that one trip where I was talking about, where I have that picture of us camped on the edge of that canyon rim with no other humans, no other sign of humans anywhere in sight.
Right.
I opted to not take the trailer on that one because we knew from our research on looking at the maps, like we were not even going to be on trails. I mean, we were literally going to be like just crossing open country to get to where we wanted to go. And so therefore, like I knew there were going to be places where we didn't know the ground composition. We didn't really know what kind of obstacles we were going to be facing. And I kind of felt like in that situation, like going straight, like not even like off road. I mean, like we weren't even, like I said, we weren't even on trails. We were just in open country, open back country. I felt like taking the trailer was introducing a little bit of a liability. So on the trailer, I have one of those rooftop tents, or people call it a RTT. I have a rooftop tent on the trailer, and then I have like a bed rack that can go across the bed of my Tacoma, which have actually, like in recent years, have become more popular. And so like when my setup is like full up, I've got the truck with the bed rack, with the trailer, with the RTT. But if I'm not taking the trailer, I can move the refrigerator into the truck, and I have like a little camp box that goes back there. Everything gets strapped down. I can either camp in a ground tent, which would be up in the bed rack, or I can take the basket off the bed rack and move the RTT from the trailer onto the truck. So I have several different configurations that I can reconfigure my setup all by myself. But this is one of the things we talked about in the bug out bag episode, is like people get these like romantic notions in their head. Like, if shit hits the fan, I'm going to go all off road. I'm going to go into the back country and I'm going to roam the earth like Book of Eli, except I'm going to do it in my Tacoma. And that's really not realistic. I mean, I said at the top of the show, the longest I've ever gone off road was 7 days before you have to go back and resupply. You have to make your way back towards civilization to get more food, get more water. And when you're doing vehicle dependent, which we talked about, like fuel and fuel consumption becomes a big consideration. That's why, like, as Americans, we have these big, like, built-in ideas that are kind of part of our American culture, that are fairly unique. I mean, I'm just going to shotgun you with this question. Is it legal for me to walk up and just shoot somebody in the back? Is it legal, and is it moral?
No.
Yes, it is. If Mike Tyson comes up to you and punches you in the face and knocks you to the ground and gets on top of you and is about to crush your face with a hammer, I don't have to say a word to him, and I can draw my gun and walk up behind him and shoot him in the back of the head without saying a word. I don't have to tap him on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, sir, I would like to invite you to engage in fisticuffs."
Right, but the question that you posed to me is: it legal to shoot somebody in the back, legal and moral to shoot somebody in the back without the whole fisticuff and people punching in the face?
I did that on purpose.
Okay,
I did that on purpose. I do apologize for setting you up. I did that on purpose, but I was just doing that to illustrate that, like, Americans have this thing where it's this cowardly, yellow belly, illegal thing to shoot somebody in the back. But there are situations where it's perfectly legal, and it's actually what I would advise you to do, is shoot somebody in the back under the right situation, whatever. It's not cowardly. You don't have to say, "Excuse me, sir, you must face me." And and one of the other things, like Americans, and it goes back to like, the American muscle cars and stuff like that. Like, Americans tend to lean towards, I need this big engine, I need all this horsepower, I need a truck with 37-inch tires on it. But, like, when I was in Afghanistan, we used and they used the Toyota Hilux trucks. And unfortunately, we can't get the Toyota Hilux in the United States without jumping through a whole bunch of stuff to import it through Canada and all this other crap. But Toyota Hilux trucks, they have these really small, really underpowered 4-cylinder diesel engines. You really don't need tires. Really, most people for most things, unless you're doing some extreme rock crawling, you don't need tires that are bigger than like 31 or 32, maximum 33. But really, like 31-inch tires will probably get you through most things. But these Toyota Hilux trucks, they're small, light. They have this really, we call them gutless 4-cylinder diesel engines and 31-inch tires. But like those things, they'll go 500 miles on a tank of gas, on a tank of fuel. They'll go anywhere, and they'll last for 25 years without an oil change. Like, and
Right.
that's why they use them in Somalia, and that's why the Taliban used them, and that's what because they'll go anywhere, they'll last forever, they're bulletproof, they're good on fuel consumption, and so like all these things have to be taken into consideration if you're talking about using a vehicle for emergency bug out.
Definitely. And so you bring up 2 points, and I'm going to go back to one point you said that I wanted to touch on, and kind of like this is the spot where the teacher tells you to take notes. One of the things that you said that was very, very important is your conversion setup, right? From trailer to truck is all things that you can do by yourself.
Yeah.
Which means you can do it by yourself. If somebody was with you, they could do it by themselves. And I think that's huge. You shouldn't have your setup rely on having a second person with you for multitude of reasons, but I think that's very important. Secondly is, I had that BMW, that 6 Series, where it had an 8-cylinder in it. And it's funny because BMW eventually got rid of that 8-cylinder and went to a 6 with turbo. And some people out there say that there is no replacement for displacement, but I mean, there's a reason, even recently, where Jeep, the Grand Wagoneer, right, the new Jeep Grand Wagoneer that they came out with, started with an 8-cylinder, and it really quickly switched to this new Hurricane motor, which is a 6-cylinder. And everything I read about it, it was faster and better than the 8-cylinder. So I think the point of 8-cylinder is going to soak up more gas. I love my Hemi, but eventually, if I were to look at something, I would look differently. I'm going to bring up the next question, which is in relation to a conversation that I just had with John Patton from the Gun Collective. He started his journey a year ago with the Mercedes Sprinter and the overlanding journey. And he bought this giant yellow Mercedes Sprinter. And it's funny, he's got a YouTube channel all dedicated to it. And as I went down this rabbit hole over the weekend of going on to the websites and building my Mercedes Sprinter, obviously I started looking at price. And you're talking $75,000 to $85,000 just for the van, right?
Rookie level.
Well, that's before you build out and put everything in it. $150,000, $200,000 by the time this is all said and done.
Rookie.
So the other thing that I looked at was Ford's, the Ford E-Transit. And they basically do the whole build for you. And I asked him, I said, well, did you look at this and why didn't you go with it? So obviously Mercedes is a diesel, right? Well, the Fords they're doing as a V6 gas engine. And when when I did a little bit of research on this, you have a lot of these van life people saying that they're surprised that they went with a gasser, as they called it, over a diesel. Any thoughts to that?
I would say again, it it depends on where you're going to go and what you're going to do, but I would say gasoline is probably more readily available in more places than diesel. I mean, you stop at a gas station, every gas station has gasoline, and not every gas station has diesel. Just from that,
True.
I think,
but you're stopping at gas stations a lot less.
True.
With diesel.
If I had the option, which, like I said, without jumping through a whole bunch of hoops and a whole bunch of money, if I had the option, I would have my setup as a diesel. I would have done like a diesel. I would import a diesel Land Cruiser from somewhere or a diesel Hilux And if given the choice, I would lean towards diesel. But as far as like these bigger rigs, like what you're talking about, and like I was going to bring up Earth Roamer. If you're not familiar, just Google search Earth Roamer, all one word.
Okay.
And like they offer vehicles that are kind of what you're describing with the Ford E-Transit. Like it's a fully built out turnkey vehicle ready to go for overlanding straight up. But the entry level price for their most base level model, the entry level base model is $730,000, and then it goes up from there. So,
Oh my
you know,
God.
if we're talking about emergency bug out at that point, you might as well just buy a helicopter, in my opinion. But
Right.
that's the extreme high end. But yeah, I mean, that's sounded like you had a little loaded answer to that gas versus diesel question. But if I had the choice, if I could wave a magic wand right now and switch my truck over to diesel, I would.
No, I mean, not so much that, obviously in my earlier life, I did work in the automotive industry. I was on the service side, working on diesel engines, and there was a little bit more of a challenge to it. But I mean, in the military, all of our all the Humvees are diesel, right?
So
And
the M1 Abrams tank and the first generation of Humvees, that's like anybody that's wanting to buy a military surplus Humvee, which like I've looked at it several times and then talked myself off the ledge every time so far.
yeah,
But if you're going to buy one, I always encourage people to get the first generation Humvees, because the first generation Humvees had the CTIS, the central tire inflation system, where uh, you can inflate and deflate the tires from inside the cab, like without getting out. It's like it's not the glove compartment, but what people know as the glove compartment. There's a little
right.
control panel, and you can inflate and deflate the tires from inside the truck. And
Okay.
and then the first generation Humvees, as well as the M1 Abrams main battle tanks, they have the engines can basically run on anything, is what I've been told. Like they can run on gasoline, they can run on diesel, they can run on marine fuel, they can run on jet fuel. Somebody told me that the M1 Abrams tank, that you can pour straight up motor oil into the gas tank and it'll still run on it. It'll run on kerosene, like anything. And the Humvees to a lesser extent would run on there was something with the engine where they could run on uh, diesel or gas or marine fuel or aviation fuel or anything. So that's getting into a whole other thing. I think if you wanted to buy like a military surplus vehicle and modify that and go that route, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so, Aaron, the guy who owns Alpha Dog Arms, who does all of the engraving for ZERT, he's got a Gen 1 Hummer. It's not only does he have a Gen 1 Hummer, but it's got I believe he's got the turret hole in the top, and
Yeah.
he actually built a machine gun for that. Obviously, he's got his FFL. He built one for that thing. So
When I lived
he
in Northern Illinois, I was friends with a guy that had he had one or two Humvees, and he had like a couple of the Vietnam era deuce and a half trucks,
yeah.
and he was a metal fabrication guy. He built this from 10 feet away, you couldn't tell it wasn't real, but he built an M2, a 50 cal machine gun, but it was fake. But he made it where it ran off propane, and like
Oh, wow.
you could actually shoot it, and he'd be like, bah, 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 bah. And that, like, but anyway, sorry, that
Hey,
was a little story. That was awesome.
I mean, that would clear the streets, just for the sound alone. But so no, it wasn't really, any kind of loaded question, but I think that's if you're going to get into this world, whether it's overlanding, whether it's, for your survivalist situation, for being prepared, I think that's something that needs to be put up on the whiteboard, as far as which route am I going to go? Am I going to go gas, or am I going to go diesel?
Yeah. And I mean, like, kind of, and if we're talking about bugging out, then there's, additional considerations that can be made, because, assuming there's some major situation that you're having to bug out from, being natural disaster or socioeconomic, or, whatever we term, fall of a government, kind of government collapse, economy collapse kind of thing, Walking Dead situation, whatever it is. If you go with gasoline, you're also going to increase your opportunity to siphon gas from other vehicles, just because now in today's day and age, there's more gasoline vehicles around. So if
True.
you come across an abandoned vehicle or whatever, you're probably more likely to find a gasoline vehicle that's been abandoned that you can siphon, versus
Very true.
diesel. But
But
then one could also make the argument that you could, I mean, if you're MacGyver, you can make biodiesel like on your own with the fat out of the fryer at Burger King or whatever, like
right.
so.
But and in those situations, obviously, there's a finite amount of it. So if we are talking the shit hits the fan situation, those resources, like we've talked about in the past, where the government can just shut off this and shut off that, we're going to lose some of that ability as well. Controversial question, maybe. I don't know. We'll see how people react to it if they do. Um, is an electric vehicle an option?
I would certainly not ever choose an electric vehicle on purpose. No, I think there's way too many points of failure. I don't think. I think from what I've seen, unless there's something out there that I haven't seen, I think most electric vehicles or even hybrids, with the possible exception of like some of the brand new Ford and Chevy trucks, I think you're relegated to all like on highway travel, extreme limited distance. And I probably should, but I haven't read anything about the feasibility or is it even possible, or would it take a year or whatever to recharge your electric vehicle with a solar panel? I don't know.
So yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with it. I agree with you. I don't think an electric car / truck would be the right option. I am looking at like these. I think that it's a company called Suron or something, but they're like the electric motorcycles.
Yeah.
Something that is obvious, and for a couple different reasons, right? Because one, quiet.
Yeah, sure.
That's something to take into consideration. Smaller. I don't know if it's as heavy as one of the regular gas motorcycles, but because it's smaller, you may be able to charge it in a different, like with a truck, with a vehicle, a Tesla or whatnot. You have to go to one of these electric gas pumps and plug in, and that's how you charge your car. With these electric motorcycles, you may be able to charge that from some kind of battery type situation or just regular 120-volt outlet. I know that you can do the cars like that, but they do obviously take a lot longer. But there is a world where I think that comes into play. And I think that actually translates over to a couple of different ways. So going back to the whole camper, weekend camper situation where you want to get a camper or a motor home, if you will, because I believe that the campers and the motor homes I think that's two different classifications. The camper is what you tow behind, and the motor home, I believe, is what you drive.
Yeah, and I've done that too. To kind of throwing back to my setup, like there's been times where depending on the trip I'm going on, I'll take my trailer and I'll set my trailer up somewhere, and to use your term, like the FOB, like my trailer is now set up as my base of operations, and like I complete, because I do have a onboard air system in my Tacoma.
Okay.
So I'll unhook the trailer, I'll completely deflate the tires, and then I run a chain all the way through the axle, and then I have the hitch designed where I can cap off the hitch so nobody could hook up to it, nobody could pull it because the tires are flat, and there's a chain around the axle anyway. But I'll set that up, and I'll pop up the tent and set everything up, and that's my base of operation. And then I go off on my Tacoma on these like little daytime four-wheeling excursions, and then end up back at the trailer and sleep there at night. And I've done that for up to a week too. Up in places like Big Bear and out in kind of the, when people think about California, they think about San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, but California actually does have quite a bit of backcountry. Anza Borrego Desert State Park, in terms of land area, is the largest state park in the entire country. And there's tons and tons of backcountry out there. So I've done that out in Anza Borrego. I've done that. Actually, I did that in Southern Arizona a couple years back. I've done it up at Big Bear, where I take the trailer, but then unhook the trailer and leave it kind of at a campsite. And that's my little base that I just kind of circle back to.
Right.
So yeah, so that's a consideration too. But also, you know, talking about my setup, I've taken a lot of time and money and care into setting up my rig the way it is, so that it's modular, like we talked about, and so I can kind of do everything by myself if I need to. But I live in San Diego, California, so if there was some major event where I needed to bug out, I don't even think my setup is ideal because I've already told you that with my truck and trailer, in whatever configuration I set it up, my truck can make it to places that most people cannot, that most people's vehicles cannot. And
Right.
that being said, I don't think it's ideal for bug out. Because I think when we were talking on the phone the other day, I made the comment that my truck can go anywhere, but in a major evacuation, shit hit the fan situation, I'm not going to get out of my neighborhood because I do need to drive on the road to get out of the city. And if you live in a place where you're in, you know, any type of urban or suburban environment, the roads and highways are going to be completely jammed. And like, you know, where I'm from in North Carolina is very dense forest. So like even I could be like, well, all those cars that are stuck on the road, I'm just going to go off road. Well, no, you're not. You're not going to go off road through a dense forest. You know, you
Right. That's
can't.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you go,
So
yeah, that's right. That's a good point. Like if you look down the highway and you think you're just going to hop off and just start busting through trees, you're not.
no, you're not.
You're
And
going to have a
like,
bad day.
um, several years ago, I was dating a girl. Like I lived in San Diego, she lived in Los Angeles, and like this was one of our like major topics of discussion that we always seem to circle back around to it because there's not a good answer. I was like, if something bad happens, like how are we going to get to each other? Am I going to leave San Diego, which is kind of a lesser evil, and go on this rescue mission to the center of Los Angeles to try to get you and bring you back? Like, and it was do we try to meet somewhere in the middle and just hope one or both of us doesn't get killed along the way? Like, what, you know, what's going to be the answer? And how are you going to get out of Los Angeles? Because you've got in Los Angeles, if you're not familiar, there's mountains on one side and basically the ocean on the other. So, you know,
Right.
how are you even going to get out? And so, you know, our last couple of podcasts, we were talking about what can we learn from movies, you know, and like, um, in The Walking Dead, they didn't have some badass Jeep Rubicon on 40-inch tires. They had a
No.
Hyundai Tucson, you know, and honestly, I think that's pretty realistic because it's lightweight. It has
Well, they also, and I mean, just they also had a camper. They had a big
oh that
Winnebago
yeah, well,
camper.
yeah, in
Yeah,
the
right
first couple
in the
seasons, yeah.
yeah. But they adapted really quickly because you know, again, when if in the situation that we're potentially talking about with, you know, shit hits the fan type thing, and the highways just become a giant clogged up artery, you're not getting a car there. You're not getting a
No,
car
and
down there.
yeah, and another like really a movie that I really you know, like Red Dawn is my favorite movie that kind of changed my life, and the other movie that I've pretty much based my life upon, you know, Harry Dunn and Lloyd Christmas, you know, they abandoned their van for a motorcycle that got 150 miles to the gallon, and
Right.
you know, and drove
Yeah.
all the way to Aspen
And they traded it
to
straight
find
up.
Mary Samsonite,
Right.
and they were
Straight up.
successful. Yeah,
They
yeah,
were
straight up,
successful. Straight
and
up true.
so, but there, you know, and then this movie's kind of goofy, but there's a scene that illustrates this exact point we're talking about. It's Deep Impact, where the
Oh yeah.
asteroids come into Earth with I
Yep.
think it's the kid from Lord of the Rings,
Elijah
but
Wood.
yeah. Oh no, it's a different kid. That's a different guy, right? Or is this?
No, I believe Deep Impact is Elijah Wood.
Yeah, whatever. But at the end of the movie,
Fact
he
checkers
gets
check us.
his dad's dirt bike, and he's able to like. There's all this
Mhm.
standstill traffic of on the freeway.
Yep.
Freeway's completely jammed with panicked people in cars that can't go anywhere, and he just zooms right past them in a dirt bike. And I
Yep.
think that so like even though I've spent years and tons of time and tons of money on my setup, like I mean, if somebody were to ask my opinion on what's the perfect bug out slash overlanding slash emergency escape slash shit hit the fan vehicle, like the Triumph makes a motorcycle. It's a Triumph Tiger 1200, and it's
Oh, yeah.
basically like a super duper overlanding dirt bike is basically what it
Yeah.
is. And I mean, so,
It,
and kind of to hit all my points, like it's lightweight, it can go anywhere, it's going to get real good fuel efficiency, you can carry like, you know, lightweight camping gear and stuff like that. And I mean,
yep.
it's going to be a vehicle that's easy to get in or out of almost any type of environment, you know.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought this up, because it's something that I've been looking at. Actually, Paul Taylor went on one of these adventure touring excursions out west. But BMW makes one, Honda makes the African Twin, Triumph makes one. There's a couple of these companies that make these adventure touring bikes, and you can get them with the cages on the back and the three hard cases. And so you bring up a great point. You are more agile. You're a smaller footprint. You can get further. You can go places that you can't go in a vehicle. Obviously, the gas mileage is better, but you are limited with gas. Although you could carry a gas can with you,
and
but you are limited
less
with
gas will get you further. Also,
exactly.
You're not filling up a big F-250 gas tank, you know.
Exactly, but you're not carrying a fridge.
Right.
You're not carrying a rack with a tent on it. It's you gotta learn how to
but if you can't get out of where you are, it's not gonna matter anyway.
Well, you're right. Listen, I agree with you. I think in my perfect setup, what I would want is I would bug out with my truck, towing my motorcycle, and to the point where I could not use my truck anymore. And then we switch to that motorcycle life.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think if I had my rig and added a small dirt bike, you know, if I can mount a small dirt bike on there, so like on the back of the trailer or something, I think that would be about as close to perfect as you could get, with the caveat that if I could wave my magic wand and turn it into a diesel truck, I think that would be about as close to perfect as you could get. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so the other side to that is, I said with a trailer, but I've seen some of those rigs where basically it's like a trailer hitch that goes to the back of your truck, and you park your dirt bike on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that works in my situation with the 1500. I mean, in reality, I guess if I had to, I would kind of want a bigger truck. But I've seen one of these guys setups. I don't remember where it was. It was a video I was watching, and a guy had a big honking dually. And
wow,
he didn't have a, huh?
I said, wow.
Oh yeah.
Like,
did not
some of those Earth Roamer platforms, I think are dualies. I think.
Okay. Did not
really
have
expensive.
did not have a truck bed. It was more like, it was almost like a highway traffic support vehicle. Like it had it wasn't a truck bed, but it was like boxes, and it was like a platform. And then he had that frame up top where he had his tent up on top of that.
Yep.
But then he had all of his gear stowed between that kind of cage. I mean, it was a beautiful setup. But it was a big truck.
Yeah, you should Google search Earth Roamer, because like if you
will definitely check that out.
Like fire departments, like in big cities, obviously everybody knows what a fire engine looks like, but a lot of big cities, they have like an emergency response command vehicle. It's not really a fire truck, and it's not really an ambulance. It's like a little command center vehicle. That's what those Earth Roamer things kind of look like. It's kind of, and that kind of sounds like what you're describing as well. I think Jay Leno has one even, but.
Oh, really? Yeah. I will definitely check that out. There's one. Obviously, there's going to be some follow up. I think this has been a great episode, and I think that it's something that we could touch on again. Going back to my perfect setup, I'm actually, as I just played through it in my mind, I think I would forego the truck. I don't know. I'm torn with this, and this will definitely be something that I think about and go down rabbit holes for the next 4 days. Foregoing the truck for that all-wheel drive on 36's Sprinter type setup that has uh, more of a secure type situation where I can go from the driver's seat to the back of the vehicle to get what I need to get without getting out. Um, is kind of where I'm thinking. And again, those are just thoughts. The obviously the motorcycle situation, going back to that for a second, weather is going to play into that. Um, but who cares if we're talking a situation where you need to be on a motorcycle to get out and get alive and get safe. It doesn't really matter if you're dealing with riding in the rain.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean that's not such a deal breaker for me. The whole thing about being able to go into the back of the vehicle without getting out of it or whatever. Like what was a major inspiration for me? There's a magazine called Overland Journal, and one of the what do you call it? One of the editors or one of the main guys behind the Overland Journal is a guy named Scott Brady, and he had a truck. He sold it now, but he had a truck that was almost identical to mine. And it was a Tacoma. I think his was a 03 or 04 double cab Tacoma. Set up, like I said, the truck was set up nearly identical to mine, and then he had one of those adventure trailer chasers that I was talking about. So the trailer is almost identical to mine. Everything was really set up very, very, very similar to mine. His was probably like a slightly more well thought out setup. Like I've always said, like the way I built my truck was like this evolution of like many left turns and right turns, and I want to change my mind and do this. So like,
yep.
if I had to start over now from scratch, my truck, it wouldn't be completely different, but there are some things that I definitely would have done differently. And this guy Scott Brady, he had the background and experience to already have that hindsight when he built his Tacoma, but he drove his Tacoma from southern Arizona to the Arctic Circle and back. And there's this whole, like, you can, if you Google search, like try Scott Brady, just common spelling, SCOTTBRADY, Arctic Circle Expedition. You should be able to find it. But his truck is almost identical. His truck and trailer almost identical to mine, and he drove his truck all the way from southern Arizona all the way up to into the Arctic Circle and back. And that was really a big inspiration for my truck and my setup, because to me, I think that's kind of an ultimate test of your truck. And one of the other things, I touched on it briefly, but if you're going to try to build a rig like this, you need to have the knowledge to be able to make repairs out in the middle of nowhere. That's another big thing about my truck and the way I have it set up. I have 2 spare axles on board. I've got spare upper and lower ball joints. I know how to fix all that stuff. I know how to fix it, and I have all the tools and stuff necessary to fix it on the vehicle. When I travel, I have 2 spare tires, not just one, and they're full-size spare tires, not just the little donut spare tires that they come with. My truck has 33-inch tires on it, and my spares are all full-size 33-inch tires. So like that's another aspect. But again, like if you're starting down this rabbit hole, and you don't already have a vehicle, or maybe you have a Jeep that's not modified or whatever, just be honest and realistic with yourself, and understand that you can use your vehicle for recreation and, going on 4-wheeling trips and going camping and all this other stuff. Because I think one of the points we've made here is, if you're trying to build a vehicle, or if you're telling yourself that you're building a vehicle strictly for like shit hit the fan bug out situation, whatever you build is probably going to be wrong. Because there is no one there's no one vehicle that fits every situation. Like,
and so you're definitely going to have to be fluid with whatever you're doing, and like you said, be honest with what you're doing. I mean, if you're just looking to get to one side of the spectrum, whether it's overlanding, whether it's van life, I mean, you just have to just pick a lane and kind of stay in it. And not only I think there's one, you can take that one step further. Whatever you build, it's probably going to be wrong, but I don't think you can build one thing for all things.
No,
Like I
that's
don't
exactly my
think,
point. So don't. My
yeah,
point was just don't tell yourself that I'm building this vehicle for the zombie apocalypse, because
right.
just go get a Hyundai Tucson and call it good. But
Exactly. Or you can get the Challenger that Glenn drove in the
oh yeah,
beginning just
yep,
because. But this was fun, man. I like this one. That this is something, obviously we haven't even, this is the first time we've talked about this. It kind of goes back to the beginning when we were talking about bugging out and that whole, survivalism and being prepared. And I think
yep,
that this is something that you need to kind of have in your in your workshop. If you
yep,
are this person, I think that this needs to be of consideration, because yes, while you would love to just bug in, stay in and castle and stay in your house where you think you have everything that you need, that may not be an option, or you may need to eventually escape that option for whatever the case may be. So if you are looking into this, this is important stuff. So definitely enjoyed this kind of chat.
yeah. This was good. Lot
Awesome.
and as I've always said, like I like to, uh, hopefully the takeaway from this episode, like many of our others, is hopefully we have left our listeners with 12 things to go Google search now and look up on their own. So
Yes. Yes. And obviously when you're listening to this on whether it's Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you listen to podcasts, drop us comments. You can obviously drop them on the Facebook page when we put this out. This will go out on YouTube. I know that the YouTube ones haven't come out as frequently, but this has mainly been a podcast. We just moved to this video platform for additional content out there. So until next week, guys, thank you again for tuning in, and you stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you soon.
and get out and train, and remember, it's easy to be hard. It's hard to be smart.
There it is. All right, guys, take care.